Good day, Africa, and welcome to another exciting episode on AAU Talks. And AAU Talks is brought to you by the Association of African Universities headquarters here in Accra, Ghana. And don't forget that you can join us via our social media platforms, Association of African Universities on Facebook and AAU_67 on Twitter. And today on AAU Talks, I'm super excited because we are going to discuss one of the most important subjects that you need to know as an employee or someone who is just preparing to go on retirement. And so we are privileged to bring to you another exciting episode, and we are discussing the role of pension schemes as a safety net for tomorrow's retiree. I may not know your age, I don't know where you fall, but I believe that this discussion is going to be very important to you. I'll go for a short break, and when I return, I will let you know who my guest is, and the show continues. My name is Kwesi Sam. Stay tuned.
Are you an institution or individual? Do you intend to organize a memorable event to be archived for future reference? Then look no further than AAU Studios, because it's your best bet. With our spacious studio and state-of-the-art media equipment such as 4K Panasonic video cameras, KinoFlow lights, assorted microphones, live streaming machines, and others, you are sure to get the best of production. Visit us at Trinity Avenue, East Legon, adjacent the National Accreditation Board, or contact the AAU Studio via the following addresses: info@aau.org, AAUTV@aau.org, Ransford@aau.org. Alternatively, you can call us on 0244 185 998 or 0244 693 342.
Welcome back from the break, and you are still watching AAU Talks, and AAU Talks is brought to you by the Association of African Universities. Like I said before we went on break, we are discussing the role of pension schemes as a safety net for tomorrow's retirees. And I don't know where you fall, but I believe that even if you started working, this episode is going to be very important for you. And we are privileged to have in the studio an international motivation speaker, and then he is also an author, a communication strategist, and the part I love so much is that he's a leadership coach and then a financial executive. And so we brought you the best guest to really discuss the issue. We are so much privileged to have you in the studio, Mr. Ramsey Jay Jr.
Oh, honored to be here. Good afternoon. Thank you.
I almost said Ramsey Noah because in Africa we have one of our popular actor by name Ramsey Noah. So I almost gave you a Nigerian name actually.
Well, if it's a good name, I'll take the compliment.
Great. It is actually a good name. All right, and we are so much privileged to have you in our studio.
Thank you.
Discussing one of the most important subject to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because a lot of us on this continent, retirement comes to us as a surprise. We just live our lives, and just there about 50 years, the door is, they start knocking the door. You have just 5 years to go. And that is where people begin to plan for their retirement. I remember some years ago, we did a session for lecturers and academics back in the University of Cape Coast, and the feedback we got was that they should have gotten that knowledge right from the beginning of their employment. You are an expert, you are a financial analyst, and I don't know, what do you make of this assertion? Should retirement be planned, or should we plan for retirement the very first day that we start work?
No, it's a great question. First of all, I think that's the question where the conversation should start. And I like to say it's hard to do better if you don't know better. Right? Again, if you don't know better, it's hard to do better. And I think you're first of all being very honest with the situation. And I think the epicenter of the problem, before we start talking tactics and strategies, which I know we're going to do this afternoon, I think it's first of all to talk about knowledge and the lack of, and in some cases the information that could be the ultimate panacea for people is if they just knew sooner, like the people you were talking about at that retreat, then they may have made better decisions earlier. And as we'll talk about, I think one of the most intimidating things about money is it's a language, and it's like a foreign language. If you don't understand it, it's going on all around you, and it becomes intimidating, and ultimately you begin to regress and almost hide because you just are so intimidated by that language. But all of a sudden, if you take a foreign language class, all of a sudden you said, oh, that's all they've been talking about. And guess what? You immerse yourself in the environment. I think money is a language. And when people don't understand the basics of the language, they get intimidated. And as you know, the longer you are intimidated by money, the less you can actually make sound financial decisions. So I think your point is right, but that also leaves me with some optimism that today in our conversation we can start to put some practical tools in front of people. So like you said, we don't know who's listening, where they are in their journey, but I know they're all going to retire at some point.
One day.
And hopefully today we can help them get some ideas on how to make that foreign language a little bit more common for them.
Okay, so then let's really understand the first step. What are the things you need to take into consideration, even if you start working? Because definitely, as we said, you would definitely go on retirement. What is the first step to take?
Yes, a great question. I think, first of all, getting in the disciplined practice of what I'll call the savings mindset, right? And some people have different words for it, but we could call it pay yourself first. Right? And some people have a hard time getting comfortable with the idea, if I made $100, you mean to tell me before I do anything with that $100, I should take 10 of it and put it somewhere safe and not spend it and kind of call it my savings fund? And I'm here to say, yes, you are. And the discipline of doing that every time you get $100, guess what? All of a sudden you look up and now you've got $100 saved, and now you've got $200 saved. And you look up pretty soon and you've got a little bit of money. A lot of times we have to be okay with starting with a little bit and save that little bit. And it's not so much what you're saving, it's the disciplined mindset of putting financial strategies in place. And I'll talk about it, but there's a basic equation that we should probably talk to people about, which is intimidating, but when you break it down, it gets very simple, and that's called the time value of money. And we should talk about that as we continue the conversation. But I just want to plant that seed now for our listeners that we're going to help you understand time value of money. And what that's going to help you understand is the sooner I start, the more value I'll be able to create. Time value of money. So we'll break that down, but that'll help you understand why the sooner you start, the more value you'll be able to accumulate.
Okay, so then let's even go into the time value of money, because these are the three most important components that you will need to put in your bag.
I agree.
You really want to. So what are we talking about? Time? What are you talking about? Money?
Yes.
And then the rest as well.
Yes, so this is the principal equation in finance is the time value of money. And if we were to talk finance, academic, call it banking talk, we would say that the future value of your current investment is equal to the following equation, and it's the present value times or multiplied by parentheses 1 plus the R, or the rate of return that you're earning on that asset, and then it's raised to the nth power, and the n means the number of compounding periods. So if you put it together, you're saying that my dollar in the future can be equated to the present value of that dollar multiplied by the rate of return I can earn on that dollar if I invest it today, and the number of periods I can compound that investment. Now, if someone at home got confused, that's okay. I did the first time I heard it too, okay? But all we're saying is, guess what? The dollar
it's similar to a compound interest in mathematics, right?
That's correct. So all we're saying is, the dollar you have today is more valuable than the dollar you have 10 years from today because of what you can use that dollar to make money for you tomorrow, today. So if you have $1 today, you invest it today, all of a sudden you have $1.10, and you didn't do anything. That dollar just grew. And if you invest another dollar, now you have $2.10 earning another 10% of interest. And if you keep doing that math, you can start seeing, if I just keep doing that, that dollar becomes $2, that becomes $2.50, becomes $3, $3.50, $4, $5, and you haven't done anything except save. And it begins to grow. And we've always said you can become a millionaire with incremental investments if you start early enough. It's hard when you start later because you don't have enough time to put the right amount of money into a savings vehicle. So start with a little bit early and keep investing it and let that investment make you money, thus the power of compounding. And that's how you can see people start with a little bit and end up with a lot with a disciplined practice. That's called the time value of money. The sooner you start investing, the more time you have to compound, the more value you'll have in the future.
Okay, then how do we build that discipline? Because when you speak to a lot of young people and people in the midlife crisis, midlife career stages and what have you, they keep talking about the fact that I earn very little. And so we have that perception that we should be able to be earning maybe the hundreds before we should be able to save. How do you build this discipline so that right from the beginning of your career, you have it at the back of your mind that I need to save and prepare for my retirement?
Great question. So I think what you're talking about here again is a mindset, and I think you're arguing for equity mindset. You're thinking like an owner when you do some of the strategies that we're talking about. You're thinking like a consumer if you don't practice this discipline. And I always say to people, would you rather be the owner or would you rather be the borrower? Would you rather own the building or would you rather rent the building? Now, I have to be honest, it's going to take you a little bit longer to own the building. You could rent it today. You could own it 10 years from today. But think about the value in being the owner versus being the forever renter. I say this, it's a short-term mindset to rent. It's a long-term mindset to own. And oftentimes the challenge we have to think about is beyond me. And we have to think generationally. So if I practice this mindset, maybe I won't get all of the return, but guess what? My kids start this much closer to owning the building. And guess what? When they eventually own the building, it always becomes a source of wealth for generations to come. There is a fact that it usually takes 3 generations to go from wealthy to wealthless. This is a statistical, financial fact. You can have the richest family in the world. If they don't practice the things we're talking about, they'll be wealthless. But guess what that also says? It says the inverse. It means you can start with very little. But if you do these disciplined practice, maybe not your son, but your grandson will be the inheritor of the wealth principles that you put in place. So I say to people, what role do you want to play in the generation of your family? You have 2 choices. You can be one that is the wealth creator, which means maybe you don't get all the benefit, but someone in your family will, or you become the one that decreases all the value that perhaps your family started, because it will usually take more than 1, more than 2. It's usually that 2.5, 3 generation mark where you see big change in wealth accumulation or wealth depletion. I think everybody who's willing to think generationally will be able to become wealth creators, but it has to shift from being consumed and own, and that takes more time. But if you start early, as we talked about, time is your asset. Use it correctly up front.
Great, and that's very excellent. One of the most important things is that when you come to Africa, we have a lot of us in the non-formal sector. Very few people find themselves in the formal sector, and so when you talk of retirement and preparing for retirement, pensions and what have you, it's much more comfortable. But what about those in the non-formal sector, those doing petty trading, those who are doing some kind of non-formal businesses? How do we still get them to prepare for their retirement as well?
Again, it's a great question. The systems for some of these individuals, maybe it's a little bit different, right? But the principles are identical. They're the same, right? And so maybe someone you're talking about, maybe for them, we're going to talk about pensions and defined benefit plans and defined contribution. Maybe for that group, that's not relevant, right? That may not be a practical agent for them. But you know what it is a practical agent for them? If they're an entrepreneur, which I know a number of our friends here in Africa are. I've met many of them. I've seen many of them during my time here. You know what an entrepreneur thinks about? It's how do I build this business to a point where I can hand it down to someone to inherit. So maybe I'm the business builder, and I started by going out and getting the raw material and building the storefront and accumulating the inventory and building the clientele. Well, guess what? The next person who takes over that business starts from there. So they don't have to spend that much time or energy doing all of that legwork. They can say, you know what, why don't we open another shop over here? But they couldn't do that if they had to start building the business all over from the beginning. That is, in effect, a retirement asset, okay? Because now we've got 2 assets generating 2 times the cash flow, okay? So maybe it's not a defined benefit plan and defined contribution plan, things I know we're talking about, but I think what we're really talking about, are you creating a financially secure way to live life beyond your working, quote-unquote, days? And if you have an asset that generates cash flow, guess what? That's what a pension does. It creates cash flow for you when you're not working anymore. And so I think we can help those people understand that even if they don't use the financial system, the financial markets, an investment advisor, they can still say, hey, would you like to be able to hand down 2 storefronts to your child, to your grandchildren, and then you can live off the cash flow of one of them while you grow the other one, guess what? We've just taught them retirement, savings, and that's the same conversation. So maybe we change the asset, but we don't change the mindset, and we don't change the discipline or the strategy.
Okay. I was just asking, when I was reading through your profile, I was asking how you're able to do all, an international motivation speaker, a communication strategist. I know you've met quite a number of people, but most importantly, when you have young people who have just started work, and let me just again give you what happens on our continent.
Please.
For example, people just walk looking for a job, and then maybe at a point of age 30, that is when they've started making some money. Now, assuming you have a group of young people within that same category who are just earning very little, what would be the strategies that you give them right from day one, so that they know what to do, where to invest, and the most essential things they need to do before the bell starts ringing?
Yes, no, I think it's a great question. Sure. I think, first of all, let me answer the question with first what I think they need to be thinking, and then secondly, let me think about the strategy. Number one, they need to be thinking about what they ultimately want to achieve. I talk a lot about dreams and that sort of thing. We're not going to do that today, but I do think that is an important nugget to deposit here. Sure. And I always say to people, if you have a significant dream, then you'll be behaving significantly differently. If you have a mediocre or an average dream, then you'll behave average, right? So to this young person who maybe is saying, I don't have a lot, I don't know what I can really do with it, I would say, that's not my first question. Okay. My first question is, what do you want? Not what do you have? Okay. That changes the mindset. Because if I say, what do you have? You say, oh, I just have 1 bottle of water. I said, no, no, no. Is your dream to own the water company? That changes the way you act with that 1 bottle of water.
That's true.
We need to help young people answer the question of what they want to achieve versus them always fixated on what they currently have. If you can change what somebody expects to obtain, you can change the way they act with what they currently have. And here's the thing, you know as well as I do, even if you don't have quote unquote a lot, if you have an imagination, a mind, a creativity, a work ethic, and obviously a program like this, you have a lot of resources that are giving you information, resources, books, guides, get an education, get a certification, go online, download some information, start a business, go to YouTube on a learn how to versus watching music videos. If you're doing that as a young person, I'm telling you, you won't be able to fail.
Absolutely.
If you're just kind of saying, well, I just have this, I just have that, then you're going to find yourself in a position where 30 years into the game, you're like, well, what have I done to really move the needle? And I'd say, well, you haven't done enough of the right things because you probably didn't have a real vision of what you want. And I always say to them, when you answer that question, say whatever it is, you want to own it, you want to create it, not you want to work for it. You hear the difference? Whatever it is, if you want to be in the water business, no, own it.
Own it, okay.
You want to go into music entertainment, own the studio. Own the record label, own the car company, don't drive the car, own the sports franchise, don't play for the team. What am I saying? If you're aiming like this, you'll be able to make better decisions
here. So then you must be a generational thinker?
You must be. You have to be generationally aiming in order to achieve what we're talking about today.
Okay, but most of the time it is much more, that is the common balance, that it is easier said than you just going through the mail. Most especially, we have young people who would want to probably make it in life one day, but the means and the how is where we struggle most of the time. So if you want to own a bottle company and you have a bottle, how would you ensure that within the space of time, maybe 2, 5, 4, 5, 6 years, you will be able to get to that dream? What goes on in that process?
Sure, I love that.
I know investment comes in and then the other portfolios and so forth.
I love that. So you always start, entrepreneurship starts right where you are, right? And so if you start, let's say, I call it wholesale retail, right? Wholesale is someone who distributes the product to someone who goes out and sells to the market. I always say, if you are in the wholesale business, then you say, I'm going to go get this water, and rather than drink it, I'm going to go sell it to you for $2. Now I have $2, and now I have the ability to buy 2 bottles of water, right? The first thing you said is, I'm not going to consume, I'm going to distribute. And guess what happens if you do that 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. What are you starting to create? You're starting to create a franchise. You're starting to create an actual asset, a reputation in the marketplace, an opportunity for you to now be able to go to your distributor and say, look at how much I've been doing. Can you now give me 2, what I'll call pallets of water? And how'd you get it? My credit or my reputation, the trust I built because I've done right with every bottle you've given me, I've given you back the money. Now you've built a reputation that allows you to get credit or what we'll call leverage. Ultimately, if you can do that with a reputation, which is what you can do early, you'll start to see, well, gosh, now I have 100 bottles. And I started with just 2 to 3 to 4, and I didn't have enough money to buy 100, but I had enough credit with the distributor who trusted me to do the right thing, and now I'm able to have 100 times my 1. We've done just a simple example of 100 times 1.
Sure.
If you get that right, and you keep repeating that, it becomes 200, it becomes 250, it becomes 500. Now you've got what we'll call a scalable model. And if you tell a young person today, you mean to tell me I can do that? And you actually show them the very practical steps, not only do I think they'll do it, I think they'll be excited to do that. And I think if you break it down to what I call steps that can't be confusing, that foreign language I talked about, they'll get it. And I'll tell you this, and I'll give it back to you. We have a lot more young people that are entrepreneurs than they realize.
Oh, sure.
Okay? We got a lot of young people that know accounting, that know inventory, that know sales relationship, that know marketing. They know it. They just don't know how to call it that. But they know it. And when we start teaching how they can take that knowledge and scale it, it's like a light bulb. But someone has to teach them that. And part of this program, hopefully, is giving some people a couple of nuggets that they're saying, okay, that's starting to make more sense to me.
Great. That's very important. Then we come back to the working class, for example, we are just moving into the pension area. A lot of people have their own kind of ideologies. They have their own fears with retirement vis-a-vis pensions and everything. But you are an expert, and I love the fact that you are a financial executive. What are let me even understand, or my viewers should understand, what pension schemes are, and then how do you even start the entire process? Immediately you start working, how do you fight for the right, for the fact that your employer must pay your pension schemes in the road of you preparing for your retirement?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to talk about it, but I'll give you just a quick background. Like my parents, both of them worked for, in the U.S., they worked for the city or the government. And when you do that, obviously, you're a government, you're a city employee. And if you do that for a certain amount of years, you have a benefit or a pension when you retire. And so my mom just retired, and she worked for the city that we grew up in Ventura, which is in Southern California, for 40 years.
That's right.
And when she retired, she has a pension that now pays her a percentage of her salary for the rest of her life. Because of the work that she's done as an employee, she gets a benefit. A pension is also called a defined benefit. What does that mean? It means you work for a certain number of years. Your company or employer is saying, we will define how much we will pay you as a benefit when you get done working for us for X amount of years. So it's an incentive to say, hey, keep working hard here for us, and if you do that for 20 years, 30 years, when you retire, we'll continue to pay you 75%, 80% of your salary, even though you're not working anymore. Guess what that means? You can say, oh, I can retire comfortably because I'll always have at least
something little coming into
75% of my salary for the rest of my working days. So in a layman's term, a pension is a benefit that one earns as a financial reward for the service to the company that they work for. And I think before we start talking about modern day pension, it's important to remind people, if we go back to, in America, I'll speak for America, but in the Civil War, the soldiers who fought in the war, the benefit for them was a pension as they survived the war for their service or their sacrifice. And a funny story is, we're still paying a benefit, a pension, to the last descendant of a survivor of the Civil War. So she's getting
several years.
Yeah, she's getting $73 a month.
Okay.
But she's getting that as a benefit because of someone in her ancestry service during the Civil War. We did that in the Revolutionary War. So that's kind of the notion of what a pension is. And so companies are trying to help employees obviously do right by them, but also do right for them as they retire. So that's a defined benefit plan. There's also a defined contribution plan, which is a plan where an employee is actively saving and paying into, and an employer will match a percentage, versus a defined contribution where the employer bears the brunt of the majority of that payout, but it's something that happens when you fully are retired.
Okay. So in Ghana, for example, I think every employee pays close to 18.5%. And I think out of the 18.5%, we have the Social Security agency, which is a national one, of course, called SNIT. And so they take, I think, 13% of that, and then 5% also goes into, we have the 3 tiers here. I don't know if that is the same strategy in the US. And I'm asking this because we want to compare the ratings, we want to compare the schemes in Ghana, and look at what happens in Africa generally, if you have any idea, and also look at some other European or the American state, what happens there as well. Then we'll be able to get a fair view of it. So in Ghana, like I said earlier, we pay the 18.5, absolutely. 13 goes into the tier 1 that is managed by the state-owned institution. Then the 5% goes into the private institutions that also provide pensions as well. Is that the same thing that happens across the globe as well?
Well, it varies. Okay, there's a range there. That's a loaded question. That there's a lot of differences. So I'm not going to say that maps mirror for mirror, because that would not be accurate. I think what you'll find in the United States is a pension plan that's just, or pension system, because there's individual plans within that system, and there's a lot of diversity within individual pension plans. The broader pension system in the United States, it's just much more advanced. It's just much more mature. It's much larger. And anything you have scale, clearly you're going to have derivatives of a plan if there's just a huge pot to manage, right? So round numbers, I think you would have roughly, $600–700 billion of pension assets in Africa. You would probably find that if I were to take the 3 largest pension plans in America, they would equal that. Right? There's 2 plans in California that are $250 million, $250 billion each. One in New York, another $250 billion. So in just 3 plans, I've kind of equated the scale of investable pension assets in the continent of Africa. So scalability-wise, you'll see if I take all of the pension assets in America, it would be multiples of where Africa is today. That said, as you know as well as I do, with the development, the rapid acceleration, advancement in technology, the kind of what I call derivative and diversification of natural resources in the continent of Africa, the continued influx of capital, capital markets that are becoming more liquid, you're starting to see that will grow, that working class will grow, population growing, getting more people invested in a savings mindset. You will find Africa's pension system to become more dynamic, to more mirror, call it our friends in the West. It's not going to be a today agenda, but I would say you will begin to see the ability to apply more of the sophisticated strategies and techniques that you're seeing your friends in the West do, but it's not a today agenda. I think what you will say is similar, though, however, is the idea that here's something I want to dispel. Both of us struggle with encouraging people to get prepared for retirement. That's not an Africa phenomenon. I want to dispel that. I got a lot of people I can talk to in the United States of America that are struggling with retirement, the R word. And it's not an Africa phenomenon. It's not an American phenomenon. I think it's a human psychology phenomenon. People saying, oh, what am I going to do when I retire? They're saying that in the home of the free, land of the brave, and they're saying it here in Mother Africa. And so I think what we want to continue to remind people is they actually have a lot more control over that outcome, even if the system, the scheme, the plan, things that we can talk about that have those strategic elements to them, it still has a lot to do with the individual taking full advantage of a system and understanding it and being disciplined and managing themselves and their spending habit and their spending profile, and then all the other external things that we're talking about come into play. The biggest plan I think here is in South Africa, and that's roughly $120 billion plan, and that probably has a lot of the elements that you would say mirror a large sophisticated pension plan in the United States of America. However, if you only have $2 billion or $3 billion in the scheme and plan, it just limits what you can do. But it doesn't mean that you can't begin to use the same disciplined practices to get the most out of the benefit that you're trying to guarantee for your retirement.
Great. So then what are the, we'll go for a break shortly, but before we do so, we want to understand what are the benefits. Why should someone contribute to his or her pension scheme? Because we tend to get a lot of people complaining that, you know, they invest into it and then when they're on retirement, they just get something mega. We cannot even put, as in their lives together in retirement. What are the benefits and how would you be able to encourage a lot more people to really focus and then invest more towards their retirement in terms of pension scheme, even before we look at the other portfolio?
Sure. So I think a couple of things. One, you don't ever want to, you know, there's a saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket,
Sure.
or diversification is the best rule to risk mitigation. So what are we saying? If I say I'm going to depend on just you and just your goodwill to me to take care of my goodwill in the future, that's what we call a risky retirement scheme, retirement plan.
Okay.
However, a pension plan is a component of what I call a financial profile for an individual. It's not the exclusive one, and it probably shouldn't be the only primary one. It should be one of them, but it shouldn't be the only one.
Only one.
Right? So I think what we want to encourage people to think about is the benefit of a pension plan is one part of my retirement plan, my retirement strategy. And most pension plans have an incentive that is usually fair for you to accept as an employee to take advantage of the full benefit of working there. So some people on the defined contribution plan side say, if you put in $1, I'll match it with 25 cents. You know what that's called? That's free money. You should take advantage of that. And that's a good investment decision for you. Otherwise, there's also tax favored reasons to take advantage of that, and that it could decrease the tax burden that one pays if they're participating in the pension scheme. So there's a financial incentive from a tax perspective. So you start to develop a broader understanding of why a pension works and what it does, you'll see that there's actually some basic components that are just good business sense to participate in it. Doesn't mean it should be the only strategy or that you should put 100% of your retirement into it, but certainly if you have the opportunity to participate in a pension plan at your employer and you're taking what I would call zero advantage, I would argue you're probably not taking full advantage of the retirement opportunity set in front of you.
Let me ask you, once you are here, I think it's a good opportunity of a question that I was asked by a young person some years ago, and it sounded a bit funny, but I saw sense in it. He was asking, why must I contribute to a plan? Because you know retirement is just, or when you contribute to your pension, you just reap the benefit after you retire. So for example, I'm 25 years and I'm going to retire at age 60, definitely have some minimum 30 years to enjoy and make contribution. Now, what we find on our continent is that people go through a lot of struggles. They are not able to put up a house. They are not able to even afford a simple car. They're not able to afford the basic necessities of life. And he was of the view that, why can't I just go into my institution and say that, you know what, when I retire, I will buy a car out of my pension, possibly. I would build a house out of my pension. Why don't you give me those things now so that I live a very comfortable life? I'll be able to take care of my children, because whatever be the case, you may not be able to tell when you are dying.
Yeah.
What advice would you give?
Yeah. Well, you're saying, you know, you can't take it with you, is what you're saying, right? And no one knows when, quote unquote, that clock is going to strike and you, quote unquote, your time has expired. I think it's a fair question, but I want to caution what I call the flat line of that thinking. Okay. That's a very flat line perspective, but I understand where it's coming from. However, there's also this sense of you have to be in this country, in this continent, I think you have to be okay with being an entrepreneur within the business. Okay? And so if you're at a company and you're saying my wage is X, the cost of my lifestyle, my family, my children, and you kind of do all the math and you're saying based on my current paycheck, I'm looking at what I have left at the end of the month, and you may be saying, hey, Ramsey, I love what you're talking about being disciplined, being a saver, but I need to take care of expenses now.
Absolutely.
And I say, I understand that. So I would say to that person, in the immediacy of obviously taking care of your responsibilities, no one's saying don't have food to pay into the pension plan. That's not what we're saying.
Okay.
What we are saying is, in this current state of affairs, can you be thinking of an innovative way to make more dollars with the dollar you have?
Okay.
If someone can tell me, and here's the honest question, if they can honestly tell me, I can make more dollars with this dollar outside of putting it into the pension plan, guess what I would tell them? That's a good decision to make.
Okay.
What a lot of people aren't doing is thinking about, okay, if you're not going to put the dollar into a system that clearly is saying we will give you a return, may not be how much you want, may not be when you want, but it's going to give you a return, then I would say to them, you must be able to argue for an opportunity that will give you at least that, or the opportunity for greater than that.
Okay.
If it goes into 100% consuming mode, unless it's an absolute necessity, I would say that is a very bad trade.
Okay.
So to the young person, I would say, I hear you, I understand, I feel your pain, okay?
Sure.
What are you gonna do with the dollar instead of putting it into the pension plan? And if he or she says something other than save because I have to for a must expense, then what he's telling me is it's a short-term consuming behavior, and I'll argue to him he'll always be a consumer and never an owner.
Okay.
There's the question he has to, or she has to answer.
Okay, so it's more or less like a scale of preference and a priority. You need to make sure that you know your priorities and then know what you want in the near future. Absolutely.
That's it.
All right.
That's it.
Viewers, you are still watching AAU Talks, and we are discussing how you will be able to prepare for your retirement, and then how you'll be able to take advantage of the pension schemes that we have in our country, on your continent, wherever you find yourself. We'll go for a short break. We still have our expert, Mr. Ramsey, in the studio. We'll be back.
In matters of life and death, you would never leave it to chance. You look for someone dependable, caring, and above all, someone who knows exactly what to do. At Wisconsin International University College, Ghana, we train our students to work in the most basic and in the most sophisticated healthcare environments. With the help of our new state-of-the-art simulators, the first of their kind in Africa, students learn how the human body really works and how it responds to various stimuli and treatments.
The nursing school has been in inception since May 2016, so we are in our second year. What sets us apart is the kind of environment in which the students are being trained, especially in terms of skills training. Our skills labs are among the best in the country and in West Africa as a whole.
You got to see a simulated birth here. We can do these births about every 7 to 10 minutes with a setup and things like that. Now, comparable to other simulation centers, obviously there's no other simulation center here in Africa that can offer that. In the States, this is very comparable to the same experience that our students in the States will experience over here.
Don't leave your education to chance. Enroll at Wisconsin now and get world-class training in nursing, community health nursing, and midwifery. Wisconsin International University College, Ghana. Leaders in international education.
Welcome back from the break, and we are still watching AAU Talks. And today on AAU Talks, it's been interesting, it's been educative, it's been insightful. We are discussing pension schemes and how relevant they are to tomorrow retirees. And if you want to enjoy your retirement tomorrow, I think and I believe it begins from today, the decisions that you will be able to make. And so, Ramsey, before we even draw out the curtains, very importantly, there should be some take-homes. I'm much more interested in the young people, because that is where we have a lot of the problems. Because we, in Africa, anyway, I think it's globally as well, people think life begins at 40, and so we tend to waste the early years of our lives. And when you're about 40 years, we are now trying to think twice and think well. And so what are the take-homes? Most especially for young people who would want to be entrepreneurs, who would want to be business tycoons, who want to own certain asset. What must they do right from day one to make sure that by the age 60 they go into retirement and they are not crying, but they are laughing and smiling as well?
Yes, no, I love it. A great question. So this is going to be simple, but I think sometimes simplicity means it'll actually be applied.
Exactly.
The first thing has nothing to do with money, strategy, a lot of things we're talking about. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. We said at the beginning. It's up here.
The mindset.
Okay, and I really want, especially young people, because I hear your heart, I feel the heart of the matter. I really want to encourage our young viewers to not fall victim to only thinking about things as they are. I know that's easier said than done.
Sure.
But if you can for just a moment, don't answer that question with as they are. Answer them as how you want them to be. Okay? See that and articulate, narrate that, write that vision down. Okay? Get that in your mind that that is a possible reality. Okay? We've got to get that right upstairs first and foremost. Okay? Now, if you're buying into that, which I hope people are, then we can start talking about the strategic ways to do that. And here's what I think we need to do. I talk a lot about role modeling.
Okay.
I'm saying that on purpose. It is a verb. A role model is someone whose poster I put up on my wall and I look at it.
Sure.
Okay. Role modeling is I take the poster down and I dissect everything about that person. How did they do it? Who did they do it with? What books did they read? What classes did they take? How many times did they fail? How did they rebound? I'm now taking the model off the wall and I'm dissecting it and understanding how did they put that thing together. Young people, this is all people, especially young people, here's what I want them to do. You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a tycoon, you want to be a dot-commer, you want to be a technology enthusiast, you want to be a sports star, you want to be a lawyer. I don't really care what it is, just make it big, and here's what I want them to do. Find me 5 people who have achieved that dream, and then don't tell me what they achieved, tell me the 5 steps that they went through to achieve it.
That's important.
If you can do that 5 people over, guess what you're going to say? I got a plan. And it's going to tell you, so-and-so didn't start with anything either, just like you. So-and-so grew up in a more difficult country, more difficult environment. They figured it out. So-and-so failed and lost everything, but all I see is them with everything. What you'll find then is a reason to say, you know what? First of all, someone did it with less, someone failed, someone was not as smart, someone didn't have as much access, someone didn't think they could either. And that is who we want them to begin to emulate. So number 1, get their mind to thinking they can, then let's get the role models to show them not what they achieved, how did they do that thing? So that's the second. And then the third thing, and I know this isn't going to be a sexy answer, if you will, but I believe we need to encourage our young people to read. And I'm going to pause and I'm going to say it. I know you're not going to like me right now, but I'm telling you right now.
But I mean, it's the hard truth. It's very important.
It's hard truth.
Knowledge is the basis of everything.
Because with knowledge, you have power to make better decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay? And with the internet and technology, you can literally read about how to do anything you want, not in Africa, on Earth. Okay? But you have to be willing to, you know what, spend some time reading. Now, I know people wanted to hear more financial strategies, but here's what I'm telling you as an expert in finance. People who delve into giving you financial advice as the first step are not giving you good advice. Because if you don't have yourself right and fit, the financial advice comes on top of someone who's not thinking right, doesn't have the right role model, and is not going to continue to study, so it's going to come in and then it's going to come out. But if we build the foundation right from your mindset, right, to your vision of what you can do, to an example of how to do it, and then we give you the financial toolbox, you'll say, okay, now I got a reason to follow the script. So I think those 3 steps are first, then it comes into the strategies and the dollar here versus a dollar there, the pension plan versus the retirement plan versus the contribution plan versus the stocks versus the bond versus the borrow. All that makes a lot more sense if you got those first 3 steps correct.
Absolutely. Oh, great. And obviously you are the first role model that we would see. I'm sure if someone is watching, the first role model that comes to mind is you. And so I would, and I don't know your age, but I know you are a young person, so you fall within that bracket. How would you be able to share your success with us? Because when I was going through your profile, I was asking myself again, how do you do all these things? And so how will you share your success with young people, and especially the challenges that we've been through? We want that a lot, so that we'll be able to learn from that, and tomorrow we could start somewhere and say that I listened to Ramsey, I read from Ramsey's book, and today I am who I am, and I am where I am because of that little episode of information that I listened or I watched?
Good question, and I appreciate the opportunity. First of all, thank you to you and to AAU Talks for creating the platform and creating the forum, right? I'm just a surrogate that comes in and pumps information, but you guys created the infrastructure to go out and educate young people across Africa. So that's a compliment to you and the AAU Talks team, family, and administration. What I would suggest to them, now that I have the opportunity to kind of deposit into that, is the following. I'm in the empowerment business at the end of the day, and that comes in finance, it comes in academics, it comes in government, it comes internationally, but at the end of it all is a motion to empower. And I say that means you live your life without fear and limitation. And I wrote a book that talks about that, actually. This is the book right there. So if people are interested in a resource, this is the book. It's a resource that talks about how do you become a dreamer turned what? An achiever, right? We want to talk about that, and I'm not trying to promote that, but I am trying to promote you need a constant source of empowering content to help you not only stay motivated, but to teach you how to go left and right and side to side. So I'm in the business of providing that. I provide that content on a website. All the social media channels are all just my name, RamseyJJr.com, Facebook, and all those, Instagram. And I constantly am putting out the stuff I'm talking about. Because as a young person especially, you need to have a constant reminder. I know I used to be a kid. Mom and dad told you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, not because you're not smart, because that's what it takes for it to sink in. So I constantly am putting out this sort of content so people have the ability to say, I didn't get it the first time, but I saw it, and then guess what? Boom, it clicks. 3 things I would tell people, and I talk about it in my book, but you don't need the book to know these things. Number 1, they've got to do what some of them did today. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. This is not going to change if you're going to be comfortable all the time, okay? Get comfortable being uncomfortable, and it's okay for that to be your reality. The second thing I always tell people is never let somebody ask you where you're from without also being able to tell them where you are
going to.
Okay? Because that anchors your mind into where you are. Never let someone help you anchor to where you are. Be proud of where you're from, but be prouder of
where you are
going. So number 1, get comfortable being uncomfortable. 2, never let someone ask you where you're from without also being able to tell them with passion where you are going. And number 3, to make it kind of tie in our financial principles, understand this. Time is an asset. It helps you create more value if you use it well. Time is also a liability. If you use it poorly, it makes it more difficult to get to where you want to go. We're talking about time value of money. The sooner you begin to use these disciplines on little things with your dollar, the sooner that dollar can lead to large value in the future.
I'm sure a lot of young people would want to see the title of the book, the camera. I'm sure you can show it to the camera. And then just maybe 1 minute, you talk about what must be in the book. How do you empower dreamers to be achievers? Just 1 minute, and then we can wrap up the show.
Sure. So it's very, very simple. First of all, there's 3 steps, and they all are very much part of what we all have to do. Number 1, you got to believe. We're talking about that. Believe, and the first key is believe that it's possible. Believe that it's possible. And I'll say it to you. If you don't believe it's possible, what are we doing here? Right? If you don't believe, no system, no pension plan, no government, no president can help you if you say, someone like me, just never going to happen. Believe that it's possible. The second one is working extraordinarily hard to make it probable. Working extraordinarily hard to make it probable. That means, guess what? Working in the face of adversity. Even though you know you may fail, we always say a setback's a setup for a comeback if you get up. Get in the habit of getting up when you suffer this, working to make it probable. And the third and most important one is preparing for the predictable in faith. This is a country and a continent of faith. Preparing for the predictable opportunity for your breakthrough to happen before it happens. Believe, work, prepare. It's possible, it's probable, it can be predictable.
Thank you so much, Ramsey.
Thank you.
I think personally I've learned a lot, and I would want to have a very comfortable retirement age.
Yes, sir.
And enjoy my retirement
yes,
much
indeed.
more than my working age, because it's very important.
Yes, sir.
Viewers, this has been AAU Talks, and we were so privileged to have in the studio Ramsey Jay, and he has been sharing with us how you'll be able to take advantage of all the opportunities that comes your way, and also make sure that you retire comfortably. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter where you are starting from, and what matters and the most important thing is where you are going. Just keep your dreams alive and make sure that you achieve. Thanks for watching. My name is Kwesi Sam. See you soon one day.